What struggles do lazy people face? Do lazy people want a happy and prosperous life? Let's find out. The Lazy Brothers, Part 1. Once upon a time in a quiet village lived two brothers named Tom and Jack. The brothers were known throughout the village for one thing: their laziness. Every day, Tom and Jack would find a comfortable spot under a shady tree or on a soft patch of grass and spend their time lounging around. They avoided any kind of work and never seemed to care about anything except their comfort. Their father, Mr. Brown, was a hard-working farmer who toiled from dawn until dusk to keep their small farm running smoothly. He woke up early every morning to tend to his crops and animals, always with a determined look on his face. His hands were calloused from years of hard labor, and his back was often bent from the weight of his work. Despite his exhaustion, he never complained. He worked tirelessly to provide for his family, hoping that his sons would one day understand the value of hard work. Unfortunately, Tom and Jack had little respect for their father's efforts. They saw work as something to be avoided and found every excuse not to help. When their father asked them to assist with the farm chores, they would moan and groan, dragging their feet and making the task take much longer than necessary. They preferred to lie around and dream of an easy life where they could do nothing and still have everything they wanted. As the years went by, Mr. Brown's patience began to wear thin. He worried about what would become of his sons if they continued down this path. He feared that they would never learn the importance of hard work and responsibility. Despite his concerns, he tried to teach them the value of labor through gentle reminders and encouragement. But Tom and Jack remained uninterested and continued to live their lazy lives. One day, Mr. Brown fell ill. The village doctor came and told him that he didn't have much time left. Knowing that his end was near, Mr. Brown called Tom and Jack to his bedside. His face was pale, and he looked much weaker than usual. The brothers, still somewhat indifferent to his condition, gathered around him with a mix of curiosity and boredom. "My sons," Mr. Brown said in a frail voice, "I have something important to tell you." His voice was barely above a whisper, but his words carried a weight that made the brothers listen more closely. "I have hidden a great treasure in our fields. It is not just a chest of gold or jewels, but something far more valuable." Tom and Jack exchanged glances. Their eyes, which had been dull and uninterested, now sparkled with the prospect of finding treasure. They imagined how easy their lives would be if they could just find this hidden fortune. Mr. Brown continued, "If you work hard to search for this treasure, it will bring you great wealth. But remember, it will only be found through your efforts and dedication." With those words, Mr. Brown closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if gathering the last of his strength. He knew he had done his best to impart a lesson to his sons. Tom and Jack, although momentarily stirred by the promise of treasure, were not fully convinced of the true meaning behind their father's words. After their father passed away, the brothers were left alone with their thoughts. They were eager to start searching for the treasure, but their laziness soon returned. Instead of beginning their search right away, they spent their days lounging and talking about how to find the treasure. They made grand plans and speculated about where it might be hidden, but they did nothing to actually start the work. This moment marked the beginning of their journey, one that would test their resolve and change their lives forever. Little did they know that the path to finding the treasure was not as simple as they had imagined. It would require more than just dreams and idle talk. It would demand the hard work they had always avoided. The true adventure was about to begin, and the brothers were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. After their father passed away, Tom and Jack were eager to start, searching for the treasure he had promised. The brothers, who had never worked hard in their lives, suddenly found a burst of energy and excitement. They imagined all the wonderful things they could buy with the treasure: fancy clothes, shiny jewelry, and a big, comfortable house where they could lounge all day without ever needing to work again. Early the next morning, Tom and Jack grabbed shovels and rakes and headed to the fields. They carried their tools with great enthusiasm, but as soon as they reached the fields, their excitement started to wane. The sun was hot, and the work looked harder than they had anticipated. They exchanged worried glances, but decided to get started anyway. At first, they tried to dig in various places, guessing where the treasure might be buried. They picked spots randomly, without any plan or method. Tom suggested they start near the old oak tree, while Jack thought the treasure might be buried near the fence. They argued back and forth about the best places to dig, but neither of them was truly committed to the work. They spent more time arguing than actually digging. As the days went by, their initial enthusiasm began to fade. They started to find excuses to take breaks. They would sit under the shade of a tree, sipping water and chatting about how wonderful life would be once they found the treasure. They even began to make games out of their work, pretending to be treasure hunters on a grand adventure rather than focusing on the task at hand. One afternoon, as they lounged in the grass, Tom suggested they take a nap instead of working. Jack agreed, and they spent the rest of the day sleeping and dreaming about their future riches. The oil work was hard, and they found it much more enjoyable to imagine their success than to actually put in the effort to find the treasure. Days turned into weeks, and the brothers' initial excitement gave way to boredom. They continued to dig in different spots, but with little enthusiasm. They would start a hole and then get distracted by something else. Tom might spot a butterfly and chase it, while Jack would find a stick and use it as a sword, pretending to fight off imaginary foes. Their efforts were half-hearted at best. Instead of working diligently, they often sat around and speculated about where the treasure might be hidden. Tom believed it was in a secret, underground cave, while Jack thought it might be hidden under an old rock. They made elaborate plans and dreamed up wild scenarios, but none of their ideas involved actual hard work. The brothers also started to argue more frequently. Each one wanted to prove that his idea about the treasure's location was correct. These arguments only served to make their work slower and less efficient. They would spend more time debating and less time actually searching for the treasure. Their father's advice seemed to slip further away from their minds as they focused on their own disagreements. Despite their lack of progress, Tom and Jack refused to admit defeat. They were convinced that the treasure was out there, waiting for them just beyond their grasp. They continued to dig and search, though their efforts were often half-hearted and scattered. They kept telling themselves that the treasure was just around the corner, and if they only worked a little harder, they would find it. Their laziness became a bigger obstacle than the treasure itself. The more they avoided work, the more frustrated they became. Their dreams of wealth and luxury seemed farther away as they failed to make any real progress. They remained idle and hopeful, but their actions didn't match their dreams. It was clear that they needed to change their approach if they were ever going to find the treasure their father had hidden for them. As the weeks went by, Tom and Jack's frustration grew. They had spent many days digging and guessing, but their efforts had yielded no treasure. The once exciting search had become a tiresome routine. Their enthusiasm was replaced by irritability and exhaustion. The brothers' arguments became more frequent, and their patience wore thin. One sunny afternoon, Tom and Jack were once again sprawled out under the old oak tree, their shovels lying unused beside them. Tom was frowning, staring at the fields with a mixture of anger and defeat. "We've been at this for weeks," he complained. "We're no closer to finding the treasure than we were on the first day." Jack, who had been tossing a small rock up and down, looked equally frustrated. I know, maybe we're just not looking in the right place, but where could it possibly be? He sighed and dropped the rock, his mood matching Tom's. The brothers spent the rest of the afternoon arguing about their next steps. Tom wanted to continue searching in random spots, while Jack thought they should change their strategy and focus on digging in one specific area. Their arguments grew louder, attracting the attention of a few curious villagers who watched from a distance but dared not approach. Finally, Tom threw his hands up in exasperation. "This isn't working. We're just wasting time. Maybe we should just dig up the whole field. If we cover every inch, we might find the treasure by chance." Jack hesitated. "Are you sure? Digging the whole field will be a lot of work. We've avoided hard work all this time. Maybe it's not worth it." But Tom was determined. "We have to do something. If we keep doing what we're doing, we'll never find it. Let's just give it a try." Jack reluctantly agreed. The next morning, they set out to plow the entire field. They had never done such hard work before, and it was clear they were not looking forward to it. They grumbled and complained as they gathered their tools and prepared to start. The brothers began plowing, and the work was much harder than they had anticipated. The sun was hot and the soil was tough. Every time they pushed the plow, it felt like they were working against a heavy weight. Their muscles ached and sweat poured down their faces. They took frequent breaks to rest and drink water, but they found that the work was still grueling. As they worked, they started to notice the difference their labor was making. The fields, once overgrown and untidy, were slowly transforming into neat plowed rows. The sight of their progress began to change their attitudes. They were still tired and sore, but there was a growing sense of accomplishment as they saw the field taking shape. Despite their continued frustration and exhaustion, Tom and Jack found themselves working more efficiently as time went on. They began to develop a rhythm and found that they could actually manage the work. They discovered that working together, even though they still complained and argued, made the task easier. The brothers were learning that hard work, though unpleasant at first, had its own rewards. As they plowed, they talked less about the treasure and more about how to best manage their tasks. Their discussions shifted from wild guesses about the treasure's location to practical ways to complete the job at hand. They began to appreciate the sense of progress and started to see the value in their efforts, even if it was not yet rewarded with the treasure they had hoped for. Weeks passed, and the field was finally plowed. The once unyielding ground had been transformed into smooth, workable soil. Tom and Jack looked at their work with a mix of pride and relief. They had spent many long days working hard, and although they were still no closer to finding the treasure, they had accomplished something significant. The brothers were now faced with a new decision. Part 1 of this story ends here. What decision will they make next? Will they continue digging the field, or will they hire someone else to do it? To find out, click the video here or follow the link in the description.